Hey, welcome back to the Studio Coffee. Lovely to have you here. Today we're going to touch on a topic which I find absolutely fascinating, which is how can we introduce specialty coffee and what it is that we're trying to do in this side of the coffee industry to more traditional cultural coffee practices. Sometimes we use the word commercial, but I don't necessarily agree with that because specialty is also commercial in its own right. So the question is, how can we introduce a specialty coffee culture to more traditional coffee cultures? Now, this for me is a very, very interesting question, especially in a market such as Portugal, where we are, in a sense, it may seem from the outset or from the outside, it may seem that we are directly challenging these older traditional coffee practices that are run by very big companies that do wonderful things. You know, Portugal has a very rich coffee culture and a rich coffee history due to the fact that Portugal had a lot of colonial ties to Angola and to Brazil, and which are now, like Brazil especially, is like one of the more powerful Arabica growing coffee countries in the world. Brazil produces the most amount of Arabica coffee that is exported around the world. I read online recently the big AICC is like one of the big coffee companies here in Portugal. They're like an umbrella with a lot of different smaller, huge roasteries inside of them, that Portugal was responsible for bringing the first Arabica coffee tree to Brazil hundreds of years ago. So like the history in this country it's ripe. It brings up a lot of questions, and there's always very interesting conversations when I say that I work in specialty coffee, because automatically in the mind of a local person it's like, your coffee's like more special. Like what, you're saying your coffee's more special than ours? Also questions like, have you ever tried Portuguese coffee? You know, like what's wrong with Portuguese coffee? We have the best coffee in Europe. So these are things that I've heard a lot. So I would like to touch a little bit on this topic today. First things first, traditional coffee cultures are wonderful. Portuguese coffee culture is wonderful. The traditional coffee cultures around the world, they're all also wonderful. It's just a different way to think about the product of coffee. So if I go to a coffee shop and I order like a traditional, like I want a cafezinho, aqui em Portugal, eu queria café, I would like one coffee. What you will get is a little bica or espresso, like espresso as it's known around the world, very short, concentrated shot of coffee that is roasted very dark, and you will only know the brand of the roast, who roasted that coffee. So in specialty coffee, it's as is a lot of wine producing regions in Europe, it is very important to us in specialty coffee to know where the coffee comes from, because coffee it has a potential to be an artisanal product. It's like we want to know the name of the producer, we want to know the country, the origin, like where in that country does it come from, the altitude, how was the fruit of the coffee processed down to its seed form to get the flavors. So with us, this level of transparency is very important because, well, firstly, the amount of flavor that is present in coffee, the possibility of a difference of flavor in coffee is huge. So we want to know more or less what flavors we're getting when we buy a packet of coffee. That's like the first part. The second part is that years of work go into producing one high quality coffee bean, like just one little bean. The amount of work that goes into tending to the soil, taking care of the trees, and then it takes 3 years for the first harvest to come through with a lot of the varieties of coffee trees. You pick the fruit, ideally by hand when it's ripe. You process that fruit down to its seed form in a number of different ways, which all alter the flavor at the end. And the thing is, for me, it's a great sadness to not honor that process. It's a great sadness to order a coffee and you receive it and you don't know where it comes from, you don't know what it is, because the amount of work that is done on the other side of the world for me to be drinking this lovely cup. Honduras, organic, Marcala, buy it, it's fantastic. That's this one, yes. Organic, natural Honduras coffee. So the amount of work that goes into producing one cup it's huge. So, I mean, in general in Portugal, I always try to refer this back to wine because Portugal is a very strong, fantastic and proud wine producing country. So for example, I told a friend recently, imagine that I would take, let's say, 10 different bottles of red Portuguese wine, and I would take this back to my home in New Zealand. I would mix them all together into one container, and I would pour glasses of wine to different people, and then I would say, look, this is Portuguese wine. The level of shock that story would kind of entail is exactly the same in my mind when I order a coffee that I don't know where it comes from, and it's a mix of random countries and random coffees from around the world. It's like, it's a great sadness. Yes. So when we're talking about more traditional coffee cultures and specialty coffee, they are both fantastic and they both are beautiful and can be delicious. They can also both be not necessarily very tasty if it's not done well, but like a traditional coffee and a specialty produced coffee. But the main difference is in how we think about the coffee. So for us, it's very important to know where the coffee comes from, to know how it's handled, to know how it's sourced. And then the next step of the process is that we understand that the quality is created at origin. Then the coffee is shipped or arrives at the roaster, and the roaster's job is to simply highlight the natural characteristics of this coffee, because of course for us, the farmer is the most important part of the chain. In a sense, yeah, just trying to make an example. Of course, that's an arguable statement, but in general, the roaster's job is just to not ruin this coffee that has been crafted and grown and cared for and processed with a lot of love and care, ideally. So then we get to the final stage, which is my specialty and my experience, is the barista part. It's like my job is simply to highlight and to not ruin this beautiful product that was created at origin. So we have these three phases of the coffee kind of chain, in the sense, also with importers and exporters in between, but in general we can break it down to these three. And as a barista, my job is to brew the most delicious coffee that I possibly can by learning skills, developing myself, my sensory analysis, like practicing, studying. So again, just to kind of summarize, like the main differences between specialty coffee and more cultural coffee traditions are a barista or someone who works in coffee in a more cultural, traditional setting. That is not a specialized role. In general, making coffee is coffee. So it's like coffee is coffee, cafe. You cannot have good or bad coffee. It is what it is. Also, someone who makes coffee is a low-skilled worker. That's kind of the general idea. We don't need to know where it comes from. The roasters are put on a pedestal as the masters of that business. In specialty coffee, we consider that our roasters are specialists, our baristas are specialists, and we understand that people who work in this medium, they will basically study for an entire life in order to make a really good job out of this. Yes, and also again, the priority and the emphasis, the importance is placed on origin. So with every bag you get, you see the name of the farmer and it's traceable, you know where it comes from. Not saying that specialty coffee is perfect. We do have a long way to go in order to kind of increase our level of traceability and increase the livelihood of the farmers and the people that work with specialty coffee. But in general, even though I do love a good traditional coffee, I still believe that specialty coffee is a better way forward, ethically, sustainably, for people, for the planet, and for us as consumers as well. Coffee, especially specialty coffee, again, the variety of flavors that are possible within one cup. Like sometimes I don't necessarily have words for this, but for me, it is one of the most profound experiences that I've had as a human being on this planet. The ability to be able to taste works of art from all over the world on the same table in a cupping session. This is simply honoring and paying respect to the amount of work that has been done at origin. And this is primarily, in my mind, the main differences between a specialty coffee and a more traditional coffee culture. They're both great for different reasons, and I still thoroughly enjoy a Portuguese coffee every now and then. Also, of course, we cannot separate the difference in price, because of course we're paying a premium for a premium product, which is not ideal when the salaries here are not necessarily the most lavish. So bless, I love you, Portugal. Mwah. We do our best. So it's something to bear in mind. It might not necessarily be an everyday thing, but to open our mind to the potential of what specialty coffee can bring into our lives, and also just to try and be more conscious and ethical consumers. It's good for everyone, for the entire industry, for ourselves, for the people who grow the products. I think that's all for me now. If you have any more questions about this, please feel free to leave some in the comments, and we'll try and get back to you potentially with another video if the questions are burning and very good and lots of people are asking. And if not, we'll try to respond as soon as we can. Yeah, thank you for being here. Thanks for listening to my spiel. I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye.